So, Mark and Tom, you've just published this book, Low Carbon and Loving It. Mark, I'm just curious, what led you to write this book?
Yeah, it's a good question, Penny, and we didn't take the decision to write a book lightly. I suppose one of the factors is that we've chosen, Kathy and I and Tom and I have chosen to live fairly unusual lives, living in North India in pretty poor neighbourhoods for quite a long while, a couple of decades. And so we've kind of, I suppose, accumulated a number of experiences that are strange or interesting to other people. So I've had a sense for a while it might be good to write some of these things down. But the subject matter wasn't really there for us. But when climate change came on the agenda about 5 or 10 years ago, we started becoming passionate about that and realising that it was a very, very important issue for Indians and Australians and everybody really. So the time seemed right to write about climate change but weave in some of our story from India to make it a more interesting read really, which we hope it is.
Tom, there's lots of books out there now around climate change. What makes this one different from the ones that are already out there?
Yeah, it's a good question, Penny, and one I've thought about quite a bit as I was writing it. I think a few things. So, like Mark was saying, we're weaving our experiences of life in India and in Australia into this book. So that makes it a bit different from some of the more technical books on climate change that we're actually trying to be personal as authors. We're not trying to be dry and just factual. We're trying to talk about how this issue has impacted our lives, how we've tried to change our lives in response to it. And I guess we're also trying to make this book very relevant for everyday Australians. So some books on climate change only really focus on the big picture solutions of, rolling out big renewable energy plants, electric power stations for cars, those sorts of big picture things. Whereas we're talking not just about that, but also about changes that you can make in your own life and that we can all make as individuals. We don't need to wait for politicians and scientists to solve this problem. It's up to us as individuals. So we hope this book is more relevant and speaks to people's lives.
So, Mark, just on a bit of a different note, I was curious to know what it was like writing this book together as father and son.
It's actually been really good, Penny, to write with Tom. And one of the reasons I asked Tom to join this project with me was because he's young. He was 20 at the time of writing, 21 now. And it's probably going to be young people like Tom who help us get out of this mess because they've got the most to lose if we don't fix it. And they've probably got the greatest ability to change their lifestyles. When we get older, it's harder to change, isn't it? So that's why I invited Tom into the project, and it's actually worked really well. I don't think this book would have become published if Tom hadn't been involved. Partly that's because he's very good with the science, he's very rigorous with the science, he's done his research really well. Something like 280 references in the book. He's done the science really well. But also because I think we've brought different things to the project. Tom tends to be a little more optimistic than I am. I was talking before about very low times of being pessimistic about this whole thing. Tom is more optimistic. So it was quite fun. We wrote about half of the book each, and so part A I've written and part B Tom's written and so forth. And so after writing it, we get together and we critique each other's chapters. And often there was a kind of a pattern emerge really, where Tom would look at my chapters and he'd say, "Dad, the science isn't rigorous enough. That's not. You've got to have a reference for that. You've got to have authority to say that." And so I'd take that on board, and I'd look at the chapters that Tom wrote, and I'd say, "Look, the science is great, but get some of your own story in there. Get some emotional content. How has this personally affected you?" And Tom took that on board too.
Mark, have you had many other people involved in this project?
Yeah, there has been a lot of people involved, Penny, in this project. I'm not sure how other authors do it, whether they just sit down and it's totally a one-person show or not, but we've had lots of people involved. So right from the start, I guess partly because it's our first book, we've wanted to send it out to other people and get them to give feedback on it. So during the course of the 18 months that it's taken us from the start to the finish, we've had over 20 people read the manuscript and give feedback on it, and that's been great. We've also had our friend David, the guy, do the cartoons for it. We've had my wife Kathy and son Oscar do some of the illustrations, and people like yourselves who help along the way. So yeah, it's been a very communal kind of experience.
So Mark, getting a book published can be a pretty competitive deal, I believe. So how did you go about getting this book published?
We didn't realise at the start of this process just how incredibly competitive the whole publishing industry is. Apparently thousands of manuscripts written every year, sent to publishers, so very, very competitive. So the way we approached this was, I guess, keeping our expectations low, realising that this may never be published, but we want to write it. It's important for ourselves, for Tom and I, to write it, so we did. But as we went along, we sent the manuscript to various friends and also people in the publishing industry. The feedback we were getting is, hey, there's potential in this. So after, I guess, about, I think it was 9 months, we got the draft to a point that we were ready to send it to some publishers. We did that. By and large, the feedback we got from them was, your family story in India, living in slums in India, is very, very interesting. So if you can get more of that into the book, we think this might be publishable. We took that advice. We didn't want to focus the book entirely on us, but we put more of our story in the book to make it more interesting for people. And then in the end, a publisher in November last year got back to us and said, yes, we're willing to publish this book. So that was great, and it was cause for celebration. It was a real vote of confidence that this is a book worth reading. In the end, however, that publisher said, look, it will take us 6 months because there's other books ahead of you in the queue. It'll take 6 months. And that was a little bit problematic for us because we were about to come back to Australia. We had about a 2-month window in which we could do some promotional work for the book. So that was one of the reasons why in the end we said no to the publisher. Thanks very much, but no, we'll go ahead and self-publish. So that's what we've done. We've self-published the book, had it professionally designed, and we think we've got a book that, well, we're really happy with.